In this lecture, we learn about titanium alloys, titanium biometallic alloys. We have learned already about stainless steel, chromium, cobalt chromium alloys. So, in this lecture, we will learn something more about titanium alloys. So, as we had realized earlier, that stainless steel, it has basically a high strength, it is economic, it has easy processing. But the problem mainly with the stainless steel was that it has very poor corrosion resistance. So, that's the reason we went on to the cobalt chromium alloys, and there we realized that, oh, it has very good strength, it has high corrosion resistance, but the problem is it is very costly and still it has very high modulus. So if a material has very high modulus, then essentially what happens, the bone will start thinking, oh, it is I don't need to be here, and then it will start getting reabsorbed into the body. So that is the reason we want to come back to a material which has little lower modulus, and that thing is being sufficed by titanium alloys. So they provide a good combination of high strength, good corrosion resistance, low modulus. But the only problem with the titanium alloys is that they have very poor wear resistance. So to counteract the poor wear resistance, generally titanium alloys, they need to be supplied with some sort of a surface coating. So surface coating, they take care of the wear part, so they tend to enhance the surface wear resistance of the titanium implant. At the same time, we can also apply some sort of a coating which is much more biocompatible in nature. So then titanium alloy which has very poor wear resistance, and then we can also apply some sort of a coating which can assist some bone integration onto its surface. So that coating can be more of ceramic in nature, such as hydroxyapatite. And then once the coating of hydroxyapatite based ceramic is applied onto the titanium implant, then it can basically take care of the lower wear resistance of titanium, and it can impart much superior wear properties. Also, it can provide a base for cells to grow and get adhered and proliferate on the implant surface. There is one more problem with the titanium alloy, titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, is that it has a metallic ion concentration, and that basically can tend to react, irritate, or induce some toxicity when it is released into the body. So in order to eliminate or to reduce the effects of this ion release into the body, again the sort of some ceramic coatings can also come for the rescue. And then ceramic coatings act as a barrier, and they don't allow the ions to flow easily from the implant surface to the surface of the material. And commonly the titanium alloys, they are the two very common titanium alloys which are predominant in the medical industry are commercially pure titanium, which is approximately 89.9% to 99.5% plus purity. So that has been widely utilized in the biomedical industry, as well as there is a combination of titanium with 6% aluminum and 4% vanadium. So it is also called Ti6Al4V. So it is also called Ti6-4 for easiness in the use. But these are the two very commonly used titanium alloys, and which are utilized in the biomedical industry. Coming to the microstructure part of it, the pure titanium, it is basically hexagonal HCP face, and the face is called alpha face. So pure titanium appears more, it's a more of a single phase material, and it's a HCP. And owing to the limited HCP slip planes which are available in an HCP crystal, it has very limited processability in terms of it has very limited number of slip planes. So that is generally very difficult to process as such. Again, this particular titanium alloy is generally cold work to achieve grains in the order of 10 to 150 micrometer in size. So ideally, we can get a single phase structure in titanium alloy, and to basically induce much more strengthening, we go with the cold working part, and approximately 30% cold working is given to the titanium alloy in order to achieve grains which are to the order of 10 to 150 micrometer in diameter. And there can be addition of secondary interstitial into the titanium, and those can be either oxygen, nitrogen, or carbon. They go into the interstitial sites of the titanium, and from that we can have a various combination. There are certain grades which basically differentiate the titanium alloy. They go from grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, depending on the oxygen content into the titanium alloy. Oxygen, it can be from 0.1 to 0.4 weight%. Nitrogen can be approximately 0.05 weight% maximum, and carbon can be up to 0.08 weight% into the titanium alloy. Basically, the function of all these interstitial is so that we can achieve interstitial solid solution strengthening. So we can see that once the carbon or oxygen or nitrogen they are in the interstitial site, basically they induce solid solution strengthening of the titanium alloy. And it has also been observed by researchers that nitrogen shows approximately double the effect of either oxygen or carbon. So if we have nitrogen sitting in the interstitial, it will provide much more strengthening effect in comparison to that of uh, our oxygen and carbon. And but at the same time, we can add maximum nitrogen of around 0.05 weight%. So this is the overall effect of the interstitial, that oxygen, carbon and nitrogen, they go and sit in the interstitial sites, and nitrogen shows approximately double the effect of oxygen or carbon to provide strengthening or the solid solution strengthening, interstitial solid solution strengthening. And oxygen is also very predominant in terms of enhancing the mechanical properties. Like if we increase the oxygen content from 0.18 to 0.4%, the yield strength will increase dramatically from 170 to 475 MPa. So approximately more than 2.5 times improvement it can show in the yield strength just by enhancing, by doubling the oxygen content. So that is the approximate sort of dependence of oxygen content in the interstitial. So once we have titanium, if we start inducing oxygen to a larger percentage, it will enhance the yield strength. At the same time, if we increase the oxygen content from 0.085 to around 0.27 weight%, we will also see an increase in the fatigue strength. So we see that fatigue strength is increasing approximately from 88 to 216. So it is also showing approximately if we increase the oxygen content approximate to double or triple, the same type of effect we can see in the fatigue strength as well. So we can realize that the oxygen content is very useful in terms of higher oxygen content is much useful in terms of increasing the yield strength, at the same time increasing the fatigue strength, because those sites act as some high energy regimes, and it becomes difficult for the slip to occur, and that basically provides increase in the yield strength or the fatigue strength of the particular titanium alloy. And the corrosion resistance comes in the titanium alloy because of the presence of this titanium oxide layer. So titanium oxide layer provides as a barrier for the surface to interact with the titanium implant, and this titanium oxide is responsible for rendering the corrosion resistance to the or tissue level. Because of its similarity, it can allow the cells or tissues to grow on its surface without inducing any toxic effects. So that biological compatibility is available even at molecular scale or even at the tissue level, so that tissues find a very friendly environment on its on the titanium oxide surface, because it is no more titanium. Titanium is basically covered with a impervious layer of titanium oxide. So there is no release of titanium ions through this particular titanium oxide, and the titanium oxide is much more bio-friendly. It's very bio-inert in nature, and that does not induce some irritation or toxicity effects into the cells or tissues. So cells and tissues find a very comfortable environment in terms of their adhesion, in terms of their growth, in terms of their proliferation. So that is the advantage we achieve from the titanium oxide layer, that it imparts much corrosion resistance even in the very severe body fluid environments, and again it can also impart much biological compatibility both at molecular level as well as the tissue level. And also researchers have found Casimo and Losma, they also found that titanium oxide it assists osseointegration, oral and maxillofacial implants. So that is also the thing which has been observed by the titanium oxide, that is much more bio-friendly in nature, and it allows osseointegration, oral and also at maxillofacial implants. Coming to the titanium alloy, generally the titanium itself is not that stronger in nature, so it also needs certain reinforcement, because titanium is a single phase material, and if we start making it dual phase material, so instead of having only alpha or the HCP phase, if we start inducing the secondary phase, we can also get strengthening from the secondary precipitate. Why? Because it will also impart the impediment to the dislocation motion. It can also generate some new slip systems which can be available for the slip to occur. So in that particular manner, it will enhance its ductility. So the processing part is basically enhanced. At the same time, the strength part can also get enhanced because of the dual phase microstructure. So in the titanium alloy, we have base as titanium, and generally this is called titanium, 6 aluminum and 4 vanadium. So we generally see aluminum between 5.5 to 6.5, vanadium between 3.5 to 4.5, and we have some secondary reinforcements as well, that can be iron, carbon, oxygen, and they also impart strengthening in terms of increasing either the yield strength or the fatigue strength. So that part also can be achieved from the interstitial such as carbon and oxygen. So and we can also have some other reinforcements which can go from iron, nickel and so on. But overall this titanium alloy, it is also called titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium. It is very popular material as a for the biomedical implant, as a biomedical implant material, and it consists of aluminum around 6% and vanadium of around 4%, and rest is around carbon, oxygen and so on. Again, as I said earlier, the role of additions, they go on to titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium. It forms a dual phase microstructure. So alpha comes basically from the titanium part. At the same time, alpha is also being stabilized by aluminum. So aluminum also acts as a alpha stabilizer. It renders making HCl phase much more stable. But the presence of vanadium helps in forming a beta phase. So we see this titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, it is a combination of alpha plus beta phase. So now instead of having a single phase, like in case of titanium, we had only single phase which was nothing but only alpha, and in this case we see that we have a dual microstructure. So we are seeing a kind of a dual microstructure out here, and in this case some certain pockets are only beta. So we can see this alpha plus beta. So we see this is beta and this is again alpha. So we see a dual phase microstructure which is basically assist us in terms of achieving even higher strengths and very high fatigue strength once we have a dual phase microstructure. So that is the advantage with achieving inducing the secondary alloys such as aluminum and vanadium to impart much more increase in the yield strength and the fatigue strength of a titanium alloy in itself. And one more thing which happens with the titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium is that once we heat it above 1000 degrees centigrade, we will see the formation of beta phase, because beta phase is stable at higher temperature. So once we go above 1000 degrees centigrade, we will see a microstructure which is full of beta. So we'll see 100% beta structure which forms once we heat this particular material above 1000 degrees centigrade, and once we start cooling it very slowly, then what will happen, that the material is basically being retained at very high temperature for very long time, and it cools down very slowly. So there is much more increase in the grain size. So that is a problem with the slower cooling, that we tend to see something called Widmann-Statten structure. So in the Widmann-Statten structure, we basically have a structure like this. I'll just draw it here, that we see a structure in which initially we will have only beta grains once it is heated at higher temperature. So in this case we have greater than 1000 degrees centigrade, we see completely 100% beta, and as soon as we start cooling it down slowly, we will see the increase in the grain size. So we will observe increased grain size, and after certain temperature below 1000 degrees centigrade, we will see the nucleation of alpha phase as well. So in this particular case, we will see bigger beta grains which were stable at more than 1000 degrees centigrade, and we see nucleation of alpha phase. So in this particular case, we had this larger beta grains, and in that we see a needle like secondary alpha phase. And this structure is not that good. Why? Because it can be very highly brittle, and this because its grain size is very huge, and also it is more like a needle structure. So needle, it means it can induce very high stress concentration factor. So that is the reason this structure is not so preferable. So we see very huge beta grains, and in those, once we start cooling it very slowly to lesser than 1000 degrees centigrade, we see that the alpha grains, which are HCP, they start precipitating, and since it is a needle like structure, this structure can induce very high stress concentration factor near its tip, because it's a needle like structure. So that is the reason it can be very deleterious. So we may not achieve that sort of a strengthening or the toughening what we are really expecting to see in this particular material. So that is the way we need to modify somehow in terms of the heat treatment, so that we can achieve a structure which is much more compatible in terms of its mechanical properties. So that is the though it has certain advantages in terms of its additions, but this slow cooling is inducing some deleterious effects in this particular material, and the grain sizes, they can basically be more than even 500 microns, and at this particular grain size, the properties, mechanical properties will be very inferior because of the Hall-Petch relationship. because our grain sizes are to the order of around more than 500 microns. So the overall mechanical properties, maybe such as yield strength, they will be very, very inferior. So that is the overall negativity which can be induced just by processing itself, because in this case we are taking the material at very high temperature, more than 1000 degrees centigrade. We are letting the beta to stabilize, and then we are allowing the alpha phase to form an equilibration. So we are doing a very slow cooling, and because of that we see that the grain size have extended to very huge extent. Maybe they have gone up to more than 500 microns, and then this particular nucleation will cause HCP phase to form, which is nothing but alpha, which is again more like a needle like structure, and that is inducing this negative effect. So we can see this Widman-Staten structure. It is basically we see that the HCP alpha phase, which is aluminum rich, and again which is when depleted in the vanadium part, it starts precipitating as a plate or needle. So we see that we had grains like this for the beta, and then in that we see the nucleation of this alpha phase, which can start nucleating at the within like this, and then we have this beta phase, and then again we will see alpha phase nucleating, because alpha phase will be much more stable at less than 1000 degrees centigrade. We will see more of the grains which are forming alpha now. So we will have much more regions which have started forming alpha, and then the original beta regions which were present because we had taken the particular material above 1000 degrees centigrade. So this is the initial beta, and then we start seeing the formation of alpha structure, which is much more needle like, and that induces specific crystallographic orientation in beta. So this alpha is forming by precipitating in particular crystallographic orientation. So that is the reason it comes more like a needle like structure, and that is again forming within the beta grain. So we have alpha getting precipitated in certain directions of the beta phase. So that's what is being observed out here, and it is again a coarse grained material because the material has staying for the whole heat treatment for couple of hours. So that is what the problem with this particular material is. We are taking it to very high temperature, we are letting it be there for much time, and then we are doing a very slow cooling. That is the reason the material undergoes a higher thermal exposure for a very long time, and that is the reason the grains remain very coarse. And again in that we see that the alpha is getting precipitated in the BCC type beta matrix along certain crystallographic orientations, and that is the reason it appears more like a needle like structure. And again this needle like structure can create very high stress concentration effects near its along the needle edges, and that is the reason it is a very poor structure. So to avoid that particular part, what can be done? We can do a rapid cooling, and rapid cooling it basically induces martensitic or bayonetic type solid state transformation, and since we have very rapid cooling, we can also achieve very fine microstructure. So that is the advantage with this rapid cooling, is that instead of now a very coarse Widman-Staten structure, we are seeing a martensitic or the bayonetic type solid state transformation. At the same time we are able to achieve very fine microstructure. So we are not staying at the high temperature regime for very long time. So temperature is not high anymore. We are doing a very rapid cooling. So we go to in excess of 1000 degrees centigrade, but we cool the material very rapidly, and that rapid cooling induces martensitic or bayonetic type solid state transformation, and again rapid cooling also induces very fine microstructure. And again the alloy is heated or cooled below the beta transition. So we are not letting this particular material go above 1000 degrees centigrade. So we are letting this transition happen below 1000 degrees centigrade. So we are heating the material to lesser than 1000 degrees centigrade. So we don't allow the beta to form completely. So once beta is not formed completely, rapid cooling can induce martensitic or bayonetic type transformation, and at the same time we are not allowing the grains to get coarsened. So grains remain fine and they are retained as such. So we are not letting the grains get coarsened, because we are basically heating them much below 1000 degrees centigrade, and then they are basically annealed to give a very fine microstructure. In this particular cases, we have isolated beta in alpha matrix. So that is what is happening now. We are not letting the beta form to a large extent. So we see very fine grains which can form, and these fine grains they are to the order of around 10 to 20 microns. So instead of going up more than 500 microns, they are no more 500 micrometers in diameter. They remain in the 10 to 20 micrometer regime. And once we have this fine alpha regime, so we have alpha grains, and we see that the beta is forming within it. So we will see some beta is forming here and there, but it is again scattered. It is again very fine. Fine, it means it is to the order of maybe say 1 to 5 microns or so. So this alpha is very fine because the grains themselves are around 10 to 20 micrometers. So the beta, which is basically getting nucleated at high temperature, is again very fine, and it is scattered throughout. So we see a very homogeneous structure. Homogeneous, again very fine or very refined structure, and grains are to the order of 10 to 20 micrometers in diameter. So these are the certain advantages what we are getting from here, that we are letting the material heat, but not above 1000 degrees centigrade. We keep the material lower than 1000 degrees centigrade, and then we do annealing or rapid cooling. And rapid cooling is basically retaining those fine alpha grains, and we see some precipitation of the beta grains within the alpha grains. So we have alpha grains now in the order of 10 to 20 micrometers, and then beta is getting precipitated here and there, and again the size of beta precipitated is again couple of microns. So overall what we get is very uniform structure, a very nicely dispersed beta in the alpha matrix, and now we don't have any segregation or Widman structure anymore, and the grains themselves have now limited size of around 10 to 20 micrometers. So overall properties, they grow multifold because of absence of this negative structure, such as the Widman structure or the coarse grain. So the fine grained materials also now induce this Hall patch relationship. Because of Hall patch relationship, we can get much superior properties, mechanical properties out, which are stated in the earlier lecture. So, but one thing is basically seen is that titanium alloys, the Young's model doesn't change much even with certain additions, and for a commercially pure titanium, which is cold work to around 30%, we see yield strength which is to the order of around 485, tensile strength of around 760 MPa, and it has fatigue endurance limit of around 300. But as soon as we start adding certain alloys to it, like in case of titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, and that material is forged, annealed, and heat treated. So we can see that once it is annealed, we can see increase in the yield strength to up to around 900 megapascals, tensile strength of around 1000 MPa, and fatigue strength is almost doubled. So at the 10 power 7 cycles. Again, controlled heat treating can increase its yield strength to around 1034 megapascal, which is more than a gigapascal. Tensile strength is also increased by a certain extent, around 1.1 gigapascals, and fatigue strength is also increased to a certain extent. So we can see how the role of heat treatment can be utilized in this particular processing of titanium alloy to achieve enhanced mechanical properties. So that is what it is. Like titanium alloy, we are seeing certain properties. Once we add 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, we see a dual phase microstructure, and that dual phase microstructure is basically assisting in the increase of yield strength, which is almost 2 times. And then again heat treatment, control heat treatment can again increase the yield strength by that much factor of time, and again the fatigue endurance limit can also be increased by around 2 times. So that is the way in which we can manipulate the properties of titanium alloy via certain secondary additions, and as well as performing some heat treatment in the by utilizing heat treatment of the titanium alloy. So that are the advantages of utilizing titanium alloy and performing the heat treatment, because we can achieve very superior yield strength and tensile strength and the fatigue strength. Though the Young's modulus remains same, approximately it is similar, it does not change much, but the enhancement in the yield strength, tensile strength, and fatigue strength is just phenomenal. Again, titanium alloy, as we learnt earlier, that titanium alloy, it has a very poor wear resistant. At the same time, if we want to have a very high superior fatigue property, it is basically more of the implant which takes the load and undergoes much more wear and tear in terms of taking the impact, in terms of taking the fatigue. Because ceramics, they are very brittle in nature, so they cannot take much of the load or the fatigue. They don't have good fatigue property because they are ceramic, so they don't have enough yielding which can happen in the material. So we see that the fatigue property is much more dependent on the titanium alloy. So that part we can see that fatigue property is more dependent on the implant or the titanium alloy which forms the implant, and to improve the fatigue property, it is only titanium alloy which is being responsible out here. So we need to perform certain heat treatments, as we saw earlier, that we need to perform controlled heat treatment. We have to take the material below 1000 degrees centigrade and do the heat treatment. So the yield strength and the fatigue strength, they increase to a large extent in comparison to the titanium itself. So if you are utilizing commercially pure titanium, it might have fatigue strength of around 300 megapascals at 10 power 7 cycles. But if you take a titanium alloy and properly heat treat, it can have up to 600, 700 MPa for same life cycles. So that identity essentially tells us that we have to utilize a superior grade of titanium if we want to achieve a very high or the enhanced fatigue properties, and because that is mostly dependent on the implant, because implant is the one which has to take the overall load. And secondly, there is some more term called porosity, and it is more dependent on the coating part, because porosity essentially allows us to select what is the manner in which the surrounding environment of the body will interact with the implant material. If our coating itself is bad, if coating is not good, not adhering to the cells, cell may not tend to adhere on the implant and will see a failure, or there won't be any bonding between the bone and the surrounding tissues, and the implant and the surrounding tissues. So that is a problem with the coating part, that coating also is being mostly decided by the porosity part, that we need to have enough porosity that cells can come and they can adhere onto the surface and they can cling themselves onto the porosity which is available to them, and then form a strong bond with the bone implant. So that is one more criteria, that we need to have a good porosity which is similar to the size of the cells, and that can provide anchoring to the cells. And again, this surface coating is highly responsible in terms of the biocompatibility, because surface is the one which comes in direct contact with the cells. So if the surface itself is not biocompatible, we will see some toxic effects. Cells may not tend to adhere to the surface, cells may not proliferate, cells may not grow at all on the surface. So we see that surface property is highly essential in terms of dictating the cytocompatibility or the biocompatibility of the particular material. So the secondary coating can be applied on the titanium alloy to render it much more, make it much more biocompatible. And again, the implant life itself, it depends on many aspects, such as it can depend on the fatigue property, it can depend on the porosity, it can depend on the biocompatibility. Again, all these aspects are multidisciplinary in nature. A metallurgist will come and find out about the material, mechanical engineer will come out and they will talk about much more about the fatigue property, then a biologist will come and they will talk about the biocompatibility, and a surgeon will come and talk about the overall applicability as an implant. So there are certain aspects to the titanium alloy which makes it a complete implant which can be inserted into the body. So these coatings of the titanium alloy, they also are one of the very essential components, because they take care of porosity, they decide about the surface property, also they take care about whether cell will be much more compatible or not. They can also induce some sort of a porosity under the material, they can enhance the wear resistance of the material. So they have to be the ones which are much more seeing the direct environment. So the coatings are one of the very essential components of the implant as such. So this overall study of making a particular alloy as an implant, it is interdisciplinary in nature. So that what is the underlying part, that all these aspects should be taken or considered at once, so that we can find out the viability of using a particular material as a body implant. So it is highly interdisciplinary in nature, because we can see various aspects of this titanium implant are basically being considered. One can be fatigue property, or the yield strength, which will decide the overall life, or the fatigue one material can withstand. Coming to its biocompatibility part, that whether the material itself is biocompatible or not. So we need to impart certain coating to it, seeing about the wear resistance to it, seeing about the corrosion resistance. So again, we need some sort of coatings which can be applied onto this particular material. Then coming on to the compatibility part of whether it is viable in terms of either whether cells can really cling on to it or not, or seeing about its biocompatibility, and seeing about the mechanical part, whether the fracture will occur prolonged or it will come very shortly. So those all parts are make this particular study interdisciplinary in nature, and that's what makes it much more complicated. And now coming to the wear of implants. Uh, so seeing all that part that it is multidisciplinary in nature, so wear is also one of the very essential components of designing an implant, because any two joints which are lying nearby, they will tend to wear out with time, because if there is some movement between the two, obviously the material will undergo some sort of a wear. Like we have acetabular cups and we have a ball and socket joint. So in that we can see a overlay between a metallic surface and a polymeric or a ceramic surface. So once we have two dissimilar metals which are being closer to one another, we see there will be some, definitely there will be some wear onto the particular interface. So again, wear of metallic implants is one of the very serious concerns, because once it starts releasing some debris onto while it is getting abraded or getting worn out, so that those ions will start getting released into the body. And again, this wear will occur at the different joints of the human body. And once it is being implanted into the body, there is hardly any control. So all those debris which is being generated, that is trying to accumulate somewhere. So those are being just released into the blood, and that's it. We don't have any control after that. So we need to have a material which will have very superior wear resistance once it is being implanted into the body. So we need to see that wherever two similar or dissimilar metals are coming in contact, we design it so nicely that we can reduce either the corrosion resistance, or we can increase the corrosion resistance, or we can reduce the wear resistance of those, or enhance the wear resistance of those particular implants. Like in case of a typical hip prosthesis, we see that a metallic stent is now attached to a ceramic ball. So because of the interface between the ceramic ball and the metallic stent, we and there's some relative movement between the ceramic ball, and again it is moving either in the polymeric acetabular cup, or we can see that a ball is made up of some material like stainless steel or something, or it can be titanium implant, and then we have over that we have a kind of a polymeric liner or a ceramic liner. And basically between the metallic and ceramic interface, we can see much more of fretting wear. So that fretting wear can easily be causing some loosening of the implant. So what we see, if we see that there is some wear is happening between the interfaces, between metal and ceramic interface, that will tend to increase the gap between the two. So once we see there is some debris which is being released, or there is some gap which is being generated, obviously it will lead to the loosening of the implant, and we'll need a resurgery to insert that implant back into the body and basically do one more surgery. So that particular material has failed because of poor wear resistance. So that is what is highly essential part, highly critical part in terms of increasing its mechanical property and improving its wear resistance. And coming back to one more important property of this titanium alloy is about its corrosion resistance. So corrosion of titanium alloys is also one of the very critical parts, because like generally we utilize titanium alloy, which generally tend to be good corrosion resistant because of the formation of TiO2 layer on its surface. So there is a group of Spriano which have characterized the sample of titanium 6 aluminum 7 niobium alloy, and with surfaces which were presented to a different chemical and mechanical states, and from that they have found that that titanium 6 aluminum 7 niobium, it presents a bioactive ability and good corrosion resistance only after a appropriate surface treatment. So only when surface treatment is so nicely given to it, in terms of having improved corrosion resistance, in terms of having a good biocompatible surface, in terms of having enough porosity on the surface, in terms of utilizing proper wear resistance, corrosion resistance, at the same time having it much more biocompatibility, so that it can take the overall aspect of its compatibility with the as an implant. And so it basically consists of two steps, that first of all is chemical etching and then an heat treatment. So it needs to have some sort of a chemical treatment as well, plus some heat treatment, so that it can attain superior yield strength, superior tensile strength. At the same time, it can achieve a good microstructure, so that the overall corrosion resistance is improved and overall bioactivity is also improved. So that is what the overall study which was carried out by the Spriano, that only after an appropriate surface treatment is given. Why? Because surface treatment is so important, because surface is the one which will come in contact with the material. So once an implant is inserted into the body, it is only the surface which comes in direct contact with the material. So it needs to be very compatible with the surrounding in terms of imparting a good corrosion resistance, in terms of letting the cells stick onto itself, letting the cells grow on itself and proliferate to form certain networks with itself. So that is what the overall study which was carried out by the Spriano. There is one more group of Chobe which have utilized founding the corrosion behavior of titanium based alloys. So they have taken couple of alloys such as titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, titanium 6 aluminum 4 niobium, titanium 6 aluminum 4 Fe, titanium 5 aluminum 2.5 Fe. So they have taken couple of 4 different types of alloys, and they have basically found its behavior in the Hanks solution. So then they have compared what is the electrochemical and the corrosion behavior of all these alloys for different conditions. So that's what they have found out. And at the same time, they also have done fretting wear of the titanium based alloys. So fretting wear, basically it was done using 10 Newton load at 10 hertz and for a displacement distance of around 80 microns, and they have gone up to around 10,000 cycles, and all these studies were done under the simulated body fluid environment. So basically they found that the coefficient of friction for titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium lies between 0.46 to 0.5, whereas that of 5 aluminum 2.5 Fe falls within around 0.3. And they found that the major wear mechanism was tribomechanical abrasion, transfer layer formation, and basically cracking. So there are 3 steps to it. One is the tribomechanical abrasion, then the transfer layer formation, and then finally the cracking. And it also tells that the coefficient of friction is very high for commercially pure titanium, which was to the order of 0.5, whereas it decreases in titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium marginally. It showed a variance from 0.46 to around 0.5, and again titanium 13 niobium 13 zirconium showed around 0.48, whereas titanium 5 aluminum 2.5 Fe showed around 0.3, and cobalt 28 chromium 6 molybdenum showed around 0.4 of coefficient of friction. And coming back to the corrosion part of it, that the passivation parameters were obtained from the potentiodynamic polarization studies. So they were did again in the Hanks solution at 37 degrees centigrade, and they found out the passivation behavior around at the zero current potential, which was ZCP, zero current potential, and they saw that various values for the different titanium alloys. And the region between the breakdown potential and the zero current potential is the regime where the material remains much more stable or passive. So that stable passive region is being defined in the region of zero current potential and the breakdown potential. So in this, if we just draw a comparison of all these 4, we can realize which material is basically much more stable in nature. So based on that, we can also see the approximate the passivation current density, which is around very high for titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, but it is marginally approximately half as the compared to the for the other alloys. So that's what is being observed here, that the passive range in case of materials which have a very stable passive behavior is basically being given by the difference between the zero current potential and the breakdown potential. That's what we are seeing out here, that the breakdown potential is around it is again very high for the titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, but it's approximately comparable for other alloys as well. So all these results are not so drastically different, but they all are comparable with one another. And again from the TEFL extrapolation, the corrosion rates were determined for the titanium alloys, and we can see the corrosion rates in terms of micrometer per year are approximately similar in nature, whereas titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium showed the best response, whereas others are much more comparable in nature. And those were done again in the Hanks solution at 37 degrees centigrade at a pH of 7.4, and all these parameters of zero current potential are being given here, and the cathodic and the anodic current potentials are given out here, and the corrosion current is also given out here. And the corrosion current was very high for titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, and marginally followed by this titanium 6 5 aluminum 2.5 Fe, and then it was the least for the titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium. And again the passive regime in case of materials, they exhibit a stable passive behavior between the zero current potential and the breakdown potential. So between this regime, they show a much more passive region, and we saw that the addition of aluminum is basically decreases the passive range. So we had titanium 6, aluminum 4, vanadium. So the addition of aluminum is basically decreasing the passive range, as we also saw it for the titanium 15 aluminum thing. And but the niobium addition increased the passivation range, but not as much as that of a titanium 6, aluminum 4, vanadium. And again, all the corrosion rates for all these materials which we saw earlier, whether it was titanium 6, aluminum 4, vanadium, 6 aluminum 4 Fe, or 5 aluminum 2.5 Fe, or 6 aluminum 4 niobium, they were all comparable, as we saw earlier that the corrosion rates are basically given out here, and they are not so drastically different in terms of around 0.5 to 1.5 micrometer per year. So they all show a much more stable region, and we see that the this addition of this particular aluminum is basically responsible for the enhanced passivation regime. Like all these are showing much more vast passivation regime out here. So that is what is being the role of aluminum. That aluminum is basically deteriorating the passive regime, whereas niobium is trending to increase the passivation regime, as we can see in this previous case, that once we start adding the niobium out here, we can see much more difference between the two regimes out here. So overall, we see that the corrosion rates are not so different for all these materials, even when we are adding certain iron to it, and they also clearly reveal that the stable passive polarization behavior is existent between zero corrosion potential as well as the breakdown potential. So coming back to the titanium alloy, the overall gist of it, that titanium alloy, they are mostly HCP in nature, and then we tend to add alloying elements such as aluminum, which is again a HCP stabilizer or the alpha phase stabilizer, and then we add vanadium, which is a beta phase stabilizer or the BCC stabilizer. So there are two ways we can synthesize this particular material. We can heat it above 1000 degrees centigrade and let the material cool slowly, but that tends to form very huge grains, or they tend to precipitate alpha in the beta grains, and beta grains are very coarse in nature, and from that we can get a Widmanstatten structure. But since the grains have grown to a large extent, as well as we are getting a very needle kind of a structure, this overall microstructure doesn't appear good, and then it generally shows a very poor strength. So to avoid that particular part, we take the material to lesser than 1000 degrees centigrade and we let the alpha dominate in this particular regime, and then we see certain nucleation of this beta precipitate, which is again BCC in nature. So we see very fine grained structure with very nicely dispersed beta in that. So that essentially gives a two-phase microstructure, which is very fine microstructure, 10 to 20 microns with beta of around 1 to around 5 microns in size. So that gives a very uniformly dispersed microstructure, and that is superior in its mechanical properties in terms of yield strength and in terms of its fatigue strength. So what we can see is that heat treatment is very essential or key component in terms of altering the mechanical properties. So we can increase the fatigue strength by order of by approximately 2 times once we do a controlled heat treatment to the particular material. At the same time, we realize that the surface coating is also one of the very key components, because surface is the one which comes in direct contact with the body environment. So we see that we need to have a very good wear resistance, we need to have a corrosion resistance. At the same time, coating should be biocompatible enough. So some coatings can also be applied, the ceramic coatings can also be applied. Also, we can also do certain treatment, chemical treatments to it, to the surface of titanium, so that it becomes much more compatible with the body, and then cells can really start growing onto them. So that is also one more key feature of utilizing titanium implants, that we can make use of the titanium oxide which grows on the surface, and then make it chemically active, and then also treat it thermally, so we can achieve a very good biocompatible surface out here. And we also realize that the aluminum tends to decrease the passivation region, whereas the niobium tends to increase it to a little extent, and that is what the overall corrosion and wear behavior of this titanium alloy and titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium alloy is. So basically I end my lecture here. Thanks a lot.